And we're back for episode 3.5. We begin with Beric Dondarrion preparing for his fight with the Hound. Now, as I've said before, Beric and his Brotherhood are an astoundingly peculiar group. Let's keep in mind that they claim to be followers of the Red God, but at the same time they are knights, which implies followers of the Faith of the Seven, and Beric was brought back from the dead through a kiss of life, a practice unique to the followers of the drowned god. And they reside in a hill among werewoods, the embodiments of the old gods. The Brotherhood seems not to be followers of the Red God, but instead followers of a hodgepodge religion, or a unity religion. Beric is of course the Lord of Blackhaven in the Stormlands, and would have lordly duties to Stannis. And since Stannis is a follower of the Lord of Light, one would think that Beric's allegiance would go doubly deep. But it doesn't. The Brotherhood refers to their king as Robert, or describes their king as an abstract idea of justice. They do not fly Stannis' banner, but instead are a brotherhood without banners. Now in the book, Beric himself is described as a scarecrow several times. Of course, a scarecrow is a fake man propped up to look like a real man. This makes me wonder if Beric is actually resurrected, or if his body is merely an animated puppet like, say, a White. Beric doesn't say anything that would make one think he is actually Beric Dondarrion of Blackhaven. Puppetry versus resurrection is a very important issue, especially when we think about Cat and Jon Snow. And so the Hound and Beric fight, and as in the book, Beric's sword is covered in Thoros' wildfire. I do wonder where Thoros got his wildfire from. Did the alchemist sell to anyone, or did he get it from a source back in Myr? Anyway, the Hound takes care of Beric, and Beric does not die. An interesting difference between the book and the show here is that the Hound weeps after his fight. Perhaps it's because he's so scared of fire, or perhaps the burns remind him of his childhood, or perhaps he weeps for Mycah. We simply do not know. Meanwhile, north of the Wall, Jon is heading south with a crew of wildlings. Here in the show, it's Tormund Giantsbane and Orell. However, in the book, it's a man named Jarl and Styr, the leader of the Thenns. Neither man has much trust of Jon Snow, and so they keep a close watch on him, even guarding the horses at night. And Ygritte never leaves Jon's side either, so Jon is unable to escape. Jon starts banging Ygritte around this time, and there's a very good chance that Ygritte was pregnant with Jon's child when she died. In this cavern, the book is quite explicit about Jon ejaculating inside of Ygritte. These caverns are worth noting. In the book, we find out that there is an extensive network of tunnels in the north, and generally speaking, quite a bit of Westeros is subterranean. In fact, we just left Arya's story in a hollowed-out cavern. Anyway, Ygritte insists that these tunnels even go under the wall in what the wildlings call Gorn's Way. This is important as everyone spends a lot of time making sure the wall isn't compromised, but there may be tunnels underneath the wall anyway. It would be quite a surprise if the others used these tunnels to get south. Now, one silly thing that's been kept in the show from the book is Jon's ability to perform oral sex. For some reason, he just felt like going down on Ygritte and did a fine job at it. Perhaps Theon told him about it, or perhaps he got the knowledge from a mental link with Ghost? It's hard to say. In our next scene, the Brotherhood has confiscated the Hound's gold and has given him a fairly useless IOU for repayment when the war is over. And in the book, a very similar IOU scheme also occurs with Tyrion in Slaver's Bay and Stannis in the north. I think it's likely that our author is making some sort of statement about currency, debt, loyalty, and the state. If America is destroyed, my life savings are destroyed and I don't get any of my social security. Likewise, the Hound can only get his money back if the Brotherhood survives the war. As with me and my relationship with my state, it is now in the Hound's best interest to have the Brotherhood prosper so he can have his debt repaid. It's all a system of forced loyalty to the state. Next, Jaime and Brienne have made it to Harrenhal and are greeted by Roose Bolton. Roose notes that Jaime has lost his hand, and here in the show, Locke jokes that it's hanging around his neck. In the book, it's actually Jaime that makes the joke, showing his dark sense of humor. Here in the show, Roose weirdly taunts Jaime by delivering news of King's Landing slowly, before revealing that the Lannisters won and that Cersei is fine. In the book, Roose is already considering defecting to the Lannisters and is extremely cordial to Jaime. In our next scene, Jaime is getting fixed up by Qyburn. Now here in the show, almost no background has been given on Qyburn. We have no idea why he was at Harrenhal, and no idea why he's taken in by Roose. The book gives us a little more information, but he's still a huge mystery. Qyburn was a maester of the Citadel who had his chain taken away for opening the bodies of living people. Now perhaps this was only regular surgery, but Qyburn's later cruel nature implies he was doing experiments. The only maester that liked him was Marwyn, a character not yet introduced in the show, but one who spends a lot of time with a sand snake. Qyburn finds a job as a healer with the foreign sellsword company the Brave Companions, which brings him to Harrenhal. At Harrenhal, he's taken on as Roose's personal leecher and letter writer. He then convinces Roose to put him in Jaime's company so he can be brought to King's Landing, where he falls in with Cersei. It should be noted that Oberyn Martell, a former acolyte of the Citadel, wanted vengeance against 3 people for the death of his sister. They are Sir Amory Lorch, the Mountain, and Tywin Lannister. Qyburn actually handles the dead bodies of both the Mountain and Tywin, and is present for the death of Sir Amory. No other person can be connected to all 3 men and their deaths. On top of this, Qyburn finds himself intertwined with the fates of Tywin's son Jaime and his daughter Cersei, and for this reason I place Qyburn in the center of a Dornish master plan. Now next we get a couple extra scenes in order to give some people some screen time. Cersei talks to Littlefinger and tells him that she doesn't trust the Tyrells and he should look into them. And Tyrion talks to the Queen of Thorns and tries to convince her to pay for half the wedding. Now in the book, Tyrion has an interesting side plot where a singer named Simon Silvertongue has been visiting Shae. The singer eventually threatens to expose Tyrion and Shae unless Tyrion gets him a gig at Joffrey's wedding. Instead, Tyrion tells Bronn to murder Simon and have his body fed to the masses as porridge. Now we have no idea if Bronn actually does this. I would argue that Simon is alive and well. But there's a couple interesting things about this event. If Shae and Bronn are agents of Varys, it signals to them that Tyrion is willing to murder for Shae. He's in love with her, which is important regarding his eventual standoff with his father. The other thing comes much later. During Tyrion's travels in Essos, he tells the story of the singer stew as an example of an awful thing he has done. In the very next chapter, Bran is with the Children of the Forest, or the Singers, where he has fed a bloody stew that may be human meat. Next we are treated to an extra scene where Gendry says he means to join the Brotherhood. In the book, Gendry does indeed join them, and they even knight him. However, the knighting ceremony they give him is a bit different from a regular knight of Westeros. Normally a man is knighted with, "In the name of the warrior, I charge you to be brave. In the name of the father, I charge you to be just. In the name of the mother, I charge you to defend the young and innocent. In the name of the maid, I charge you to protect all women." We don't know the charges related to the crone or the smith, but I imagine they would be about strength and wisdom. Now this is the Brotherhood's. Do you swear before the eyes of gods and men to defend those who cannot defend themselves? To protect all women and children, to obey your captains, your liege lord, and your king, to fight bravely when needed, and do such other tasks as are laid upon you, however hard or humble or dangerous they may be. So as we can see, most of the principles are taken from the Faith of the Sevens version, including bravery, the protection of women, children, and the innocent. Yet Beric's version oddly adds obeying captains, liege lords, and kings. Beric doesn't even follow his liege lord of Stannis. He even calls him Lord Stannis, and not King Stannis. So who is the king that Beric is referring to? And who are these captains? The captains of the Golden Company? So next we have Rickard Karstark murdering Tion Frey and Willem Lannister, and we get a scene very similar to the book where Rickard and Robb argue about the difference between murder and war. And really, Rickard makes a pretty valid point. Is there a moral difference between killing on the battlefield and murder? And Rickard continues with these fascinating moral questions right up until his death, as he calls Robb a kinslayer. You see, the Starks and the Karstarks are of the same line, from 1,000 years ago. But of course, if you go back 1,000 years, everyone is related, so all killing is kinslaying. At what point does someone stop being your family? And next we're back with the Brotherhood without banners again. Here Thoros and Beric tell Arya about Beric's various resurrections, which matches the book fairly well. I should say that after the Hound's release, the Brotherhood and Arya start heading north towards Riverrun to sell Arya to her family. On the trip, Arya talks to Beric's squire, Edric Dayne. Edric goes by Ned, and he reveals to Arya that her father and Ashara Dayne were in love. This naturally makes Arya furious, as she thinks her father only loved her mother. Now we don't know why Edric is named Ned, but it seems House Dayne likes Ned Stark for some reason, despite him killing Arthur Dayne and Ashara supposedly killing herself over a broken heart from Ned. Next we get an interesting extra scene with Stannis and his wife Selyse. Selyse Florent may seem like a superfluous character, but she's actually quite important. After all, House Florent is the prime part of Stannis' forces. Stannis and Selyse never really got along, and Stannis left her on Dragonstone for the years of Robert's reign, while Stannis lived in King's Landing. The two rarely have sex, perhaps only doing it twice a year, which is probably why they only have one child. Here in the show, they've also made Selyse prone to miscarriage, and they've creepily made her keep her fetuses. But none of this is in the book. Stannis' neglect led Selyse to find religion, and it was she who first converted to the religion of the Red God years ago before it was cool. It's likely that it's Selyse's connections that brought Melisandre into the fold. In the book, many of Stannis' forces start converting to the religion of the Red God, and are referred to as Queen's Men, as they are more loyal to Selyse and Melisandre than Stannis. Here in the show, Selyse tells Stannis that she's totally cool with him banging Melisandre. Again, the romance between Stannis and Melisandre is played up in the show. In the book, we aren't even sure if they're fucking. Now here in the show we find out that Stannis is quite fond of his daughter Shireen, while Selyse is weirdly not. In the book we have no evidence that Selyse dislikes her daughter. In fact, she once shoots down a very good plan to send Shireen to the Vale to marry Sweet Robin. Selyse may have done that to keep Shireen close. And while Stannis abstractly talks about Shireen being important because she's his only child and heir, he certainly doesn't go out of the way to visit her. Shireen instead spends most of her time in the book with a weird fool named Patchface, who spits out cryptic sayings all the time. And next we have the bathhouse scene between Jaime and Brienne. In this scene, Jaime tells the story of Robert's Rebellion and why he killed the king. Almost everything we know about Robert's Rebellion comes from this monologue, which is similar in the book, but much longer. Jaime and Brienne are actually sitting in the baths where red-haired Mad Donnell Lothston used to bathe in blood. And let's talk about Lothston blood. House Lothston held Harrenhal before House Went, and House Went is Cat's mother's house. Often houses marry a remaining daughter in order to take over a fief, so there's a good chance that House Lothston is related to House Went matrilineally. After all, the two houses' sigils are very similar and feature bats. And this is where it gets weird. Jaime and Brienne have sworn vows to Cat to find and protect Sansa and Arya, but mainly Sansa since Arya is assumed dead. And red-haired Sansa is the possible matrilineal descendant of red-haired Donnell Lothston. Throughout the book, there are several references to Sansa being a bat. So Jaime and Brienne are sharing Donnell's blood tub while sharing an oath made to Donnell's blood about Donnell's blood. And it gets weirder. Later, Jaime gives Brienne a Lothston shield, which is later repainted, and Oathkeeper to help her on her quest. Oathkeeper is actually the sword Ice melted down. So Brienne has a sword from Sansa's patrilineal line and a shield from Sansa's matrilineal line. And both the sword and shield are essentially hidden in new forms, just as Sansa is hidden in a new form as Elaine Stone. And in a weird big circle, Sansa could inherit Harrenhal from her fake father Littlefinger, the Lord of Harrenhal. Next we are treated to an extra scene where Shireen pays a visit to Davos in jail and offers to teach him to read. In the book it's Maester Pylos who offers to teach Davos to read, and there's likely a good reason for it. Maester Pylos is young and Stannis doesn't listen to him, and Pylos has received a message from the Wall about the others, so it may be that Pylos intentionally taught Davos to read just so he could give him that message. Meanwhile, across the Narrow Sea we have an extra scene where Jorah and Barristan are talking about Jorah's accomplishments in the Greyjoy Rebellion. And Barristan asks Jorah if he truly believes in Dany, and Jorah says he does. We quickly flash over to a scene from the book where we meet Grey Worm, who has chosen to keep his slave name. And then we flash back and Jorah asks Barristan if he sat on the Small Council, where he would hear Jorah's reports. Barristan said he didn't, and from what we saw from Season 1, that's true. In the book, though, Barristan absolutely sat on the Small Council, and knew from the beginning that Jorah was a mole. Show Barristan is a bit more clueless. Now next we have a scene where Robb is talking about his military strategy, and he wants to take Casterly Rock. In the book, Robb wants to retake the north, and plans an assault on Moat Cailin. And then we get a series of extra scenes in which Sansa and Margaery talk about their plan to marry Sansa to Loras. And then Loras meets Olyvar and reveals that plan to him. And then Olyvar reveals that plan to Littlefinger. And then Littlefinger talks to Sansa to confirm that it's the plan. In the book, Sansa simply tells Littlefinger's crony Dantos that she's going to marry Willis. And so Littlefinger tells Tywin, and Tywin orders Tyrion to marry Sansa, and orders Cersei to marry Loras, or in the book, Willis. Here in the show, Cersei attempts to taunt Tyrion about the marriage to Sansa, but in the book it's the other way around. Tyrion taunts Cersei that she has to marry a cripple. Here in the show, Tyrion is furious about his match, but in the book he's not really angry at all. In fact, Tyrion kind of fancies Sansa. And that's all for episode 3.5. See you in episode 3.6.